right, is, because I build my own, I've got the icon portfolio, but then my own personal portfolio, is this a stock that I would want to own, right? So.
Hi, I'm Sendil. So my question to maybe all of you or any one of you is, are there a certain size of company or stages of a company that is more primed for a VP of engineering interim than other types of companies?
I'll start on this one. So I've taken over teams as interim VP of engineering as small as 3 and as large as 80. At Netscape I managed like 400 or so, but on an interim basis right now, I think teams tend to be smaller because we've got open source, we've got SaaS, right? We've got so many good things, but I would say most of my projects are Series B. There was, because the company's not going to get funded unless there's somebody on the technical, typically, right? So there's 5 guys and a dog who did get things off the ground, and they probably got near a first product or at a first product, and then something went wrong. So you call the hired gun when something went wrong, which is around late A or early B, I would say, for me anyway.
I've done anywhere from 10 people to 1,000. And, each are fraught with their own positives and negatives. I don't think there really is, some perfect formula to say this size is better than another size. I think it's more of going in and assessing what's going on in the company and the people you're working with, and go from there.
Yes. So my experience has mostly been the companies. So the 1,000's really interesting to me. Mostly companies with 1,000 people have rules that say that managers have to be employees.
Yeah, I think they tend to promote from within and think more about bench strength, right?
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of examples. One, I'm working with a startup that got bought by one of those companies this year. That is 50. The total is total of 50 people, and it's probably a team of 13. And they and one of the things that happens when little startups get bought by big companies is that big companies tend to dump cash on them. So they're growing like crazy, and they've got that problem. But they also dump requirements on them that usually exceed the amount of cash that they dumped on them, which means that they can't stay in the business they were in, and they can't do the business they're being asked to do, either one. And that's a huge problem. And so over last winter, I was commuting to Philadelphia once a week, and it was because it was that bigger company. I wasn't their interim VP of engineering. I was advising the CIO and the VP of engineering around how to scale their organization. Just that kind of thing. There were 100 people in development, and they had been bought by a gargantuan financial services company that was causing them all kinds of pain.
Thank you very much for the conversation today. I'm curious to know, over the course of your careers, what has changed about leading engineers and developers? And of what hasn't changed, how have you maintained your relevance in terms of product development techniques, leadership techniques, as independent individuals who don't have an HR business over you telling you to do this or that? How do you stay relevant?
Anyone want to take it first? I'll take it first, I guess. So it's a great question. How do you stay relevant? For me, the fact that I am in 2 companies a year, right, ranging from security to mobile to SaaS to hardware, software, I'm exposed to a lot of technologies. And then doing diligence for a venture firm kind of keeps me current on Agile, Kanban, different variants. And then when I do have this built-in downtime, right, let's say I complete company A on a certain day, right, because I couldn't accept something to start A+1 because I didn't know when I was really going to be done. I typically have a week or two, or I've even had a couple months where, I was in between interim VP of engineering projects and I had my advising things or my venture partner stuff, but I'll try to do a little programming then. I did a Ruby program a while ago, many years ago. I did a mobile, I did an iPhone app, I did some, web development. I'll try to keep a little bit current that way, because I do think one of the things that I am seeing more, especially with, the younger crowd in San Francisco, right, is that there's a bit of a backlash against the Dilbert managers, right? Like the startup companies, which I pretty much work mostly with, really don't want managers who are just managers. I mean, they want people who are technically astute, who are pretty current. I mean, I don't write code in any of my interim VP of engineering projects. You're paying me too much to have me do that, and I'm not as good as all the people who work for me, but it is important to have shipped product and have a currency. I think that there's not a lot of tolerance for just people managers who have high EQ but move papers around and don't have a pretty good sense of shipping product. So I think it is important to keep that pulse on things.
So part of the way I stay current is I'm a technology hound. I like it, right? And so, what's on your virtual night table? I don't have books there anymore. Like too many wrist problems to hold a real book. So I'm really good at synthesis. This is what I do. I mean, so I can walk into almost any technology situation and figure it out fairly quickly, and they learn fairly quickly. Like, I can go ahead and ask 10 questions and get to the bottom of things, and I'm really good at it, and that's what I do, and that's why one of the reasons they hire me. Talk about, like, what's changed, what hasn't changed. What hasn't changed is it doesn't matter what tools you have, you can do a poor job. Agile can suck, okay? If you have an end date that's fixed, and you have a technology that's made up by engineers who want to just let schedules go and let things move from sprint to sprint, you're screwed, right? You got to do hybrid. You got to do something, right? And so you go read my book. It was written before Agile was really popular, and it says you got to go figure something out every single week. There has to be real deliverables. Well, what does that smell like? It smells like Agile.
You were ahead of your time, Mark.
Well, I was, and so I think people can find excuses to do things poorly, no matter what the tool is. And the same thing's true with Java. It's like, oh, we got this great language, and how many people really understand abstraction or encapsulation? Very few, right? So that has not changed. And so you have to help people really understand what's required. What's the definition of done? People still don't understand it. Oh, I wrote this thing, but I never really operationalized it. I literally was in a situation, 500 tests that were considered done, never ever operationalized.
But it works on my machine.
No, it didn't. The pen was down.
Not even that.
The pen was down. So that hasn't changed. So anyway, so we're running out.
So staying relevant, staying current, cross-pollination. It's actually one of the reasons that I try to be involved with at least 2 companies at any particular time, is that cross-pollination. And having a good red flag detector. So what both of you have said is definitely true for me. The big change, I think the big change, it has been Agile, and from the standpoint of it changes who we are as managers to be more servant leaders. Mm-hmm. And that's really been a significant change. It's not to say that there aren't some micromanaged companies still in the world, and I try to avoid them as best I can. I've been fired by one of them. I'm a virus in those kinds of companies. The servant leadership thing is a huge change in culture, and it's not like it's new. I mean, it was the XY theory from the 1950s was that's what it is, but that's the big change.
So again, for anyone and everyone, just a quick question. My name is Yash. How do you, so coming in, sort of parachuting in, I love that phrase, right? How do you gain and keep trust of the engineering team? So these are the ones that are actually going to deliver the products for you. Somehow something's gone wrong previously, but so that's why you're there. So how do you overcome that challenge, and how do you quickly make an assessment of the situation?
So the question was, how do you assess, how do you get trust, all those things. I mean, really, it's kind of like the same as you're taking a full-time job, right? You've got to go in and you got to figure out what's going on, right? And you've got to use all of us talked about, red flags and, being able to do synthesis and so on and so forth. You got to go in and really figure out what's going on. I mean, sometimes there's things hidden in organizations, especially when you get to 1,000-person organizations, right? Mm-hmm. And you got to uncover stuff and really understand what's going on. The second thing is, you got to, go back to crucial conversations, go back to all these things. You got to find, a common goal that everybody's going to agree upon. A lot of times we get called in situations where the executives or the board are not communicating effectively with the engineers, and we become the bridges for that. But I will tell you, at least in my experience, even though I consider myself to be tough but fair, when people see me fight for what they think is right, and what I think is right for some subset of the things, that's how you gain trust, right? Trust comes with two things, time and actions. And when you walk in the door, you have neither, right? And it takes time to go off and do that. But these kind of actions, when you respect what people are saying, but I think all of us have gotten pretty good at detecting bad stuff that's going on, but when there's good stuff that's going on, it's legitimate, and you fight for it, and you make common sense. That's how you win and gain trust.
Yeah, so I think Mark's absolutely right. It's not different from walking into an FTE job from walking into one of our consulting gigs. So I can't speak for your practice, but mine is to meet with every single engineer and spend time with them. And I noticed in this recent gig, the first, so I'm spending 45 minutes or an hour with each of those people, and the first 12 minutes are about their bicycle or their house or what they do on the weekend or what we do, or it's connecting on a human basis. And secondly is connecting on a work basis and connecting on a philosophy basis and making those connections. And third is listening. Not talking, but listening, and really focusing on who are people and what are they about and what's that about. There's the quick assessment thing, and also in this gig, so it's in Portland. I'm going up. I went up the first time for a day. I spent some time on the phone with them. I went up for a day. I came back the next week. I spent a day, and at the end of that, I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to be able to figure this company out? And I'm a total of 48 hours in, and I have that expectation of myself that I'm going to. And halfway through the next day, I did.
I didn't see the people I'm working with right now for 6 months. Okay, all over the phone. So you kind of have to get good at even doing it remotely.
Yeah.
I don't think I have much to add. I think you guys gave a good answer, but similar, I'll meet one-on-one with people, try to do more listening initially. I also try to make it clear that I don't have an agenda, right? I'm just here to hopefully let you have the benefit of my experience and my wisdom, if we call it that, right? I don't care if I manage 3 people or 300. I'm not political, right? Because I'm not going to be here in the long run, right? I'm just trying to really give you the best practices that I have, accumulated from being VP of engineering at, over 20 companies essentially, right? And there is a lot of pattern matching and templating, I think, when you do an assessment, right? I always look at things along the 3 Ps, right? People, process, and product. And, you know, I have a pretty good sense from doing it for so long about where to look and, you know, where to sniff and things about all those dimensions to get a pretty good assessment, hopefully pretty quickly.
John.
So I wanted to follow up with something Mark said, and it was almost a throwaway comment like they don't really understand encapsulation. And I looked and I said, wait a minute, does that mean that you're getting dissed when you're interviewing for VP by people who are not technically current, and they're accusing you of not being technically current?
Come closer. They're gonna need clarification. His questions are complicated.
There you go.
Okay, so you go ahead and you have this nice little organization around the world, and the cheapest place to hire people is in India.
Yes.
And most of the people you get to hire in India that will actually come and actually start the first day have maybe 6 months worth of experience. And there are no senior people to train them. And 10 years later, they're still not trained. And they're writing most of your code.
Was the question, do you get asked technical questions when you're being interviewed for interim VP of engineering, or?
So you made a comment about what you do in your downtime.
Uh-huh.